who say, well, boy, if my parents had been different, my life would have been different and it would have been so much easier. And I always say, you know what? You're right. Might have been. Who knows? Point is, where are you now? What are you doing with this rich, mine the rich stuff and make lemonade, baby?
When life's visible and hidden battles make you doubt that peace, love, and full-on living are possible, We Win Within brings the proof. Guests crack open their great stories that may overlap with what each of us carries, sharing raw truths, hard-won discoveries, and triumphs that illuminate the road for us all. I'm Hindy Stegman, daughter of Holocaust survivors, speaker, coach, and fellow journeyer in life, inviting you to listen, look inside, and claim the champion already rising in your heart. So, hi, everybody. I'm Hindy Stegman, and I'm your host for the We Win Within podcast. And today you're in for an unbelievable treat. We have an amazing woman, Frannie Sheridan, who's going to take us on her journey, her personal journey of how she came from point A to point Z or D or wherever. And as I always say, everything starts in our childhood. So this is going to be Frannie's gift to us to take us on her journey and going back to her childhood and wherever we travel from there. So welcome, Frannie.
Oh, thank you so much, Hindy. This is really fun, Schwesterla. It's really fun. And I am so thankful that you've created this podium.
Thank you. So take us on your journey. How far back do you want to go?
This incarnation? Well, listen, my journey has been a delight. I have zero regrets because my perspective, this is Frannie Sheridan's perspective, is everything. And it's so interesting you refer to the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I often use that phrase, has been a gift. And really, what I'm most delighted about now is having had the perspective and the consciousness to transform lemons into lemonade. That has been my journey, and it's taken a while. And of course, life can be really sucky when you're stuck or mired really in what I would call inherited post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. But I was able to, after, many years of telling my story, I was raised to be told repeatedly every day and at nighttime too, when, my father's trauma, in particular, my dad, would wake up in the middle of the night because he couldn't sleep. He was just entrenched in Holocaustica. And he chose to wake me up in the middle of the night and make me the keeper of his nighttime stories as well as during the day. But here's the thing, Hindy, is I was raised Catholic. So I was raised as an undercover Jew, so to speak. My parents are both Jewish Holocaust survivors. My mom was from Bremen, Germany, and my dad was from Vienna, Austria. And long story short, just to fast forward, after they escaped, after my maternal grandmother was murdered on Kristallnacht, which is documented in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, by the way, by William Shirer, and they finally got out, and they met and married in Montreal, Canada, as Orthodox Jews, and they were actually married in Saranac Synagogue in Buffalo, New York. What happened though, my dad was an eye surgeon, an ophthalmologist with two practices. When he first started out, like many people who escape without anything, he didn't have his papers. He had been studying medicine at the University of Vienna, and actually Sigmund Freud was one of his teachers, and he had a lifelong friendship with Anna, and that's another trajectory. But he had to become a doctor essentially all over again, and his first practice was in a tiny little town. He had to take what he could get. a tiny little town in Canada in Saskatchewan called Morse, which is akin to the American prairies. And so my parents were visibly and audibly, because they had, these Yiddish European accents, the only Jews in the town. And not only that, Orthodox Jews. It was a very Christian town. And one day my father was uh, beaten unconscious by another doctor and the doctor's wife in 1951, which is way before I was born, because, Hindi, I'm so young and so incredibly. Anyway, but this court case, by the way, I have all the documentation. I went, I obtained everything for my first traditionally published memoir. And because you have to have that, for the publisher. So what happened was the doctor and his wife were fined $20 and $15 for assault. So, my father's PTSD went full throttle. He thought, oh, because they basically told him they were going to murder our whole family. And by then, my parents had 4 kids, my 4 eldest siblings. They were going to murder everyone and blah, 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 make your family into dog food. They wrote all over his walls, with his own blood, blah, 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 blah. He thought, what's the point of being Jewish? If I'm going to have another entire family murdered, this time in Canada. And so rational, irrational. Since then, documentaries have been made about Moore, Saskatchewan, having been a haven for Nazis. And
How old were you, Frannie, at the
I
time?
wasn't born. I wasn't born. I was born in 61.
Okay.
So years later. By the time I was born, my father had forced my very religious Orthodox Jewish mother, who had a particularly strong tie with her mother, who, as I mentioned, was murdered on the night of the broken glass, Kristallnacht, forced her to go underground, not only convert, yes, convert the whole family to Catholicism, anglicize our name from Siegel to Sheridan, relocate and cut off ties with all extended family members. Excuse me. So by the time I was born, we were, I thought this nice little Irish Catholic Jewish family. My last name is Sheridan, don't you know? Sheridan. And excuse me, and have a sip of water over here. We're out of Manischewitz. Mm. So, we were living in Ottawa, Ontario, and we went to church every Sunday, St. Basil's. I was baptized, confirmed, the whole Megillah. My name is Frances Rosemary Sheridan. And so when you're a little kid, you just accept what your parents say they are, plus there wasn't, any information about Jewish Holocaust survivors or anything like that was on television at that time.
Your older siblings never said anything to you?
No, because Hindy, we were told if we told anyone that we were Jewish, it would get all of us. So that includes our entire family plus us murdered. So my father became, he was extremely successful as an ophthalmologist with 2 practices and a surgeon. He took really good care of us financially, but he was, he went into Nazi cuckoo land. And this, I have zero blame for him. At one point, I worked, I'm not going to name him, but a Broadway director who I love wanted me to do my show, in New York. I was working with him and get angry at my father. And that was why I decided not to do it with this lovely man who shall go unnamed, but because I dealt with my, issues around my father privately. And also he did the best he could. He was tortured. We all, you know better, you do better, right? And I adored my father. He did, he did the best he could. But yeah, I was brought up with, this terror and this shame, which became systemic. So when I was 9 years old, Hindy, he slipped up at it was, I think, dinner. Might have, I don't remember which meal, and said something about a Jewish, and I was like, "Daddy, what's a Jewish?" And he was, said, "Well, it's a religion. It's a culture. Don't ever, ever tell anyone we're Jewish or could get us killed." And then later that night, he began telling me a series of Holocaust stories. And so my little, Walt Disney-esque childhood became this very sepia tone from the Holocaust, right? All those colors and gray and dismal. All of a sudden, I had this thing that I carried that something was wrong with me. not only that, now this is where it gets really nutsy cuckoo. He told me that if I, basically stood up to him and questioned his authority, especially, and I'm just going to say what he did in this case was he literally recreated a war within the confines of my family because my mother and him were at total odds. Her brother, my uncle, is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. He has passed on. I called him my rabuncle, Gerd. And he, obviously wanted us to be Jewish. He was a social worker in New York City. And so my parents were at ends. It was the beginning of the end of their marriage. And my father accused my mother of being the enemy. And they literally, we seven siblings, six siblings, seven kids, divided us in half. I was on daddy's side, although I was also very close to my mom. And, so I grew up in this division. And that's why I'm so passionate that the sides are within me, that they're, and I'm so about peace because it was a gift, Hindy, because I totally, but I grew up in this structure. And whenever I defended my mom, my father would say that he could have me institutionalized. That you're crazy like your mother. He said that she was crazy. And so I thought I was not normal, which is my audiobook, which is going to be released in about a week called I Tried to Be Normal, but it was taken. So, what's normal anyway? But the point is that I had these beliefs that plagued me.
So, as a child experiencing this, obviously your nervous system never got a chance to relax. You must have been on edge all the time. How did you act out? How did you deal with it? Were you a terror in school? Were you a bully? Were you very reserved and quiet? Mind you, I can't see you being reserved and quiet, but who knows as a kid? Who
Well,
were
that's
you?
right. Great questions. And that's, people often say to me, oh, you seem so happy. I can't believe. And that's why I've decided to do the audiobook because, and also a lot of people were saying, I want to I want to read your memoir, but I only listen. I don't have the time. Do you have an, and I did it. So, but also I wanted to shine light on how everything turning lemons into lemonade. And I really feel a very strong reflection of your belief system, Hindy. And so, how I behaved as a little girl is I was completely terrified. I did not speak. Like when I was in boarding school, I'm, in touch with my roommate from boarding school. That's a whole other story. But she said, I just thought you were shy because she saw my solo show in Miami. And yeah, I was scared to use my voice. I was scared to speak. So of course I became a writer and performer and speaker, blah, blah, blah. You know, and so the trajectory of that, what it led to was a desire, a passion. It lit in me a desire to connect. So when I was in boarding school, I went to school in Lennoxville, Quebec. My father sent me to boarding school, not because I was a bad kid, but he wanted to protect me from my mother. I think it was the best thing for him. It was very, very difficult for me at the time because I felt totally abandoned. He told me he was the only person in the world that I could trust repeatedly. And then boom, all of a sudden there I was. But it was the perfect, tragic gift, if you will. But I really couldn't speak. So then, fast forward, there I was in drama class in boarding school, and it was a Romeo and Juliet scene. And I was able to take somebody else's words from a script and channel them. You can understand why. And I glowed. And people were very excited about my ability to be lucid in that context. That's when I decided I wanted to major in acting in university. So that's what I did. So, but with that, ability, because as you know, when you're not comfortable in your skin, right? Uh, you know, whatever we're, as all these old adages are true, you're as sick as your secrets. Well, there I was carrying not only a secret, but the shame of something was wrong with me. Why else would people want to kill me and my family? Why would my father threaten to have me institutionalized? He loved me, didn't he? And he did. And that's, the duality. So,
Who were you in boarding school?
I went at the age of 11.
No, who were you? Were you the Catholic girl or the Jewish girl?
Yes. Well, actually, it was just to complicate matters, an Anglican boarding school, Bishop's College School in the Laurentians in Lennoxville, Quebec, but always Catholic.
Okay.
Catholic, terrified that anyone would know anything else. Because, I was told Holocaust stories, and I was told if you told anyone the truth of who you are, it will get you killed, and your crazy mother, blah, blah, blah. So my mother stayed closeted as well. My uncle Gerd came to visit. I was just a little girl, so he did not. I became close to him after I came out of the Knish closet, with my show. And he and his entire family came to see me perform in Baltimore, and it was a pretty irreverent show because I've had, my journey like we all have had, and much of my journey it was not a germ infested journey. And it was actually a great journey. No germs, no germs, health, health, health to you and me. My journey involved confronting shame because as much as I became publicly, see what happened in university, Hindi, is I was extremely young. I graduated at 15 and started university at 15 in upper state New York at SUNY State University, New York, majoring in theater, doing really well, got all this, attention, much younger than her freshman. She was like, classmates, and they were lauding me. And then I would do really well and come up against these barriers because whenever I was vulnerable and authentic, I got, I froze because it was my training, right? Also my dad would say like, I've seen people, murdered for telling jokes, and and so those kinds of things. So I, what it was very frustrating for my directors, teachers. I didn't know what was going on. This was way before the internet, and so there wasn't an access to the type of information you're providing, which is, so rich. And people didn't hear sort of similar stories, and people were in shame, And I just want to say that my belief, Frannie Sheridan's belief, is that and I've been to a lot of AA meetings and those kinds of things to support friends. That hasn't been my addictive journey. I've had others. Thank you very much. But what I see a lot is underneath getting off substances, there is this addiction to the chemical cortisol, and the military has really been talking about it a lot. And so this information was not acceptable. If people, let's say I went to somebody and they went, "Oh, you're an anxiety addict," like a therapist, it was pretty much topically dealt with, and people were also medicated and so forth. But at that time, my teachers and directors were just frustrated with me, and I was frustrated with me. So what ultimately happened is I didn't give up. I left university, I think at the age of 17 and a half. And I was in Toronto, Canada. Let's just fast forward. I went to live with my mom for a year. And that was so important. I first lived with my darling mother in Ottawa, where I grew up, and we bonded. And she was so happy, that I basically escaped the clutches of my father, who had retired and was living in his native Vienna undercover as a Catholic, Hindi. And he was so difficult for me to be around because we know when something's toxic, and I didn't have the language for it, but he basically made me promise that I was going to come and live with him in Vienna, and he had a job lined up for me with United Nations that he said as a secretary. So he wanted me to learn secretarial skills and go to the Reinhardt seminar, which is a famous theater institute in Vienna. He had all this stuff because he wanted to control me. And you know what it's like when we can't control ourselves for whatever reason, shame, right? We want to control other people, whether it's traffic or whatever, as opposed to finding ways. My darling father was so lost in his own pain. And at one point, my mother convinced him, she told me this, to go to see an actual shrink, a psychiatrist. But he, who had studied with Freud and was friends with Anna Freud, he screamed at the psychiatrist and told the shrink that he was the one with problems and got, kicked out of his office. So yeah, it was a bumpy road out of that. But the thing is, I said to my father, I need to go live with my mom. And so he was very pissed off at me, right? I was with the enemy, and I went to live with my mother, as I said, for a year, and it was a beautiful opportunity.
What gave you the courage to do that, Franny?
I
What
was
was
so
it?
unhappy with my dad. My dad was ultra controlling because I had left university and I had, told him that I wasn't sure if I wanted to be an actress. I didn't, as I said earlier, like have the language to say it's because I shut down and I come up against it. I just said, I'm confused, Dad. I don't know maybe this isn't the right thing for me. And he was my father was a kind of a genius in some ways, and like many geniuses, they have the light and the dark. We all have some of that in us. And, he, I think, was scared of being busted because of the shame. He also, um, you know, people at that time, women were still given lobotomies and things like that. So there was a lot of understandable terror in my dad. He did not want anyone to know that he was out of alignment, shall we say, right? That he needed his
But
chastity.
that must have taken a lot of courage on your part to know that your father, if you went against him, you could lose him. He could cut you out of his life, no?
I think what you're saying is the rational part, but my rational mind, as a young woman, didn't kick in. I just knew I was freaking miserable.
Okay.
I had been in university, independent to a certain degree for a couple of years. And there I was with this controlling dad who I loved, but it was yucky. It felt yucky being around him. And something in me, some survival instinct, I guess, Hindy, so it was more a reactive thing than courage, to be completely honest. But it was great. And my mother was so happy. And she would say to me, it's amazing you found the courage, yada, yada. And I was just, so then she told me all about her Jewish past, which is in my book. It was really very, very bonding. And so I ultimately went to Toronto and went back to college, George Brown College, majored in theater, got involved with stand-up comedy, SCTV, different things like that. But I still came up against the same cuckapoo, right? In different forms. And there was more of a cost to it because um, when I was like at Yuck Yucks, for example, I became like, okay, the owner of, like, it's like the American Improv
Yuck,
show. Okay.
yuck, yuck. This is a comedy club in Toronto.
Right. And they
Yes.
have like a chain. And so one day, the owner introduced himself to me, who owns all the Mark Breslin, and uh, he told me that like I would riff with the audience. I would because it's part of, I guess, we all have our soul's journey. It's part of my thing. And I would love to be spontaneous with people when I was. When, right, but when all of a sudden this, pattern of, oh my goodness, that would come in and I would freeze, it would mess me up big time, right? And so he introduced himself to me after I'd done a set and said, was saying, again, lauding me, you're way ahead of blah, blah, people who've been doing this for so long with your spontaneity and your delivery. And so, what's going on? And I said, Mark, thank you, but I don't know what's going on with me because I can do all this, but he said, "Oh, well, I want to set you up with a coach." And he gave me, Larry Horowitz I worked with for free. And he said, we discovered Howie Mandel, and you got all this blah blah blah, and there's a lot of pressure. I was thrilled, Hindy. Don't get me wrong, and I love Mark. It's just I didn't have it together to be able to follow through. So the thing about disappointing people and just mostly myself that was, I think, the hardest piece for me. And at one point he said, look, your instincts are amazing. I'm going to throw you in front of a huge crowd on the weekend. I'll pay you, like, you'll do 5 minutes tops. I'll give you $100. It's like what I call shock treatment. You're either going to sink or swim. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to disappoint him. And so those kinds of things kept going on, and it was tricky. I studied film acting. Keanu Reeves was in my class, all these kinds of things. And ultimately, the gift of this is that in 1995, I decided, after being kind of exhausted by this up and down and thing, and not knowing and trying and thinking it was a different format, that maybe I needed to become a jazz ballet dancer, which I studied for years at Le Ballet Jazz de Montréal in Toronto and something like that. And I did some performance, but the same stuff would always come up. Yeah. So then in 1995, I decided that I was going to transform my secret that I've been brought up with into a one-woman show. It scared the bejesus out of me because I was told that, Nazis would be in the audience, it would get me and my family killed. But again, it was intuitive, like something, I just knew that was my way through, my way out. And I had a great therapist at that time in Vancouver, Canada, where I've been living. And she was a child of Jewish Holocaust survivors, Marilee Siegel. Shout out to Marilee. And she got me. She said, I think it's a great idea. So I did it. And from the very first moment, Hindy, where I had like cue cards on stage, I mean, I had most of it memorized, bullet points, but not the whole thing. In a small 100-seat theater in Vancouver, in Gastown, which is the old part of Vancouver, after I finished, it was about 90 minutes raw, the audience would not leave. They gave me like a standing ovation, and they sat down and they wouldn't leave. And I was blown away. In that audience was a journalist who immediately wrote an article in the Jerusalem Report magazine, which you probably know is published in Jerusalem and distributed in every major international port. And because of that one article, I mean, I got tons and tons of things were just snowballing in a positive way. But because of that one beautiful article, extended family members who'd been looking for us. You remember I said
Yep.
my mom had to cut off ties, started to call me from all over the world with these very moving calls. I've been sitting on my Chesterfield reading the Jerusalem Report and magazine, and they cry. And he also published photographs, right? And so he talked about the show and the story and my work. And that was wildly healing, as you can imagine, right? And so
That's why storytelling, when we tell from the depths of our soul and we don't try to sugarcoat and it's real, is such a gift to ourselves because it frees us. And that's what this podcast is all about, is really freeing yourself. Tell that story and go deep so that you can be your true essence.
could not agree more, 100%, Hindi. So, as a result of that little show, which I did internationally in many forms for like decades, I attracted, Hollywood, if you remember, legendary film director of Love Story and, hundreds of films. And he was also the president of the American Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the little guy with all the white hair, kind of like mine. But he would come out and introduce the Oscars, the Academy Awards. And that was Arthur Hiller found me through a 9-page feature article written by another genius journalist who actually wrote the forward in my upcoming book, and that's Shelley Page. And she went all over the world interviewing my families to make sure everything was factual, as journalists are wont to do. And his best friend, Arthur's, lived in Ottawa. It's a long story, but basically he found me. He heard that I had written a multicast feature film screenplay and asked to read it. And it took me like 1/1,000,000th of a second to go, I think that would be okay, Mr. Hiller. I think I can get that. But like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Maximilian Schnell film, The Man in the Glass Booth, but I saw that when I was a little girl. and it was his film, and he had directed that. And so, wow, I was blown away, of course, you know what I mean? And so, because, okay, because of the press lifting a lot of shame, because of the reconnection with extended family members, the healing, my 86-year-old father, who I'd mentioned earlier, had retired and was living still undercover as a Catholic in his native Vienna. Who, by the way, when I started doing this work, I told him what I was going to do. He threatened me with legal action, as did one other, family member who shall go unnamed. And I used pseudonyms. I wasn't trying to, out anyone. Of course, I didn't use a pseudonym for my dad, but I'm talking about my siblings and as much as I could because I wasn't trying to, out anyone. My father sent me a letter of thanks for giving him the courage are you still there, Hindy? You've disappeared. Hello? Oh dear. I can't tell if you're there, darling. I don't hear you. You've all of a sudden disappeared. I wonder what went on there. It says the meeting is being recorded.
Frannie, I'm back.
Oh, okay. I was just calling you. Hang on. Okay. Oh, good. Hindy, can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, what happened?
we had a power surge
Oh,
and everything shut off. So
look
I'll
at
have
that. Law of attraction. Maybe
uh
it's my father.
whoa, powerful energy.
Yeah, no, he
Well,
was and is. He's a lover. He's
okay,
a guy.
we'll have to splice it.
Yeah. That was so interesting.
Let me just make sure we're going to be recording.
Okay,
Are you
darling.
sure you want to stop recording? No, so I guess it continued to record on blank, but we'll splice it together.
Okay.
Wow.
I
All
figured
right.
keep going. So basically I was at the place where I believe I'd forgotten to mention that my dad had threatened me with legal action when I told him I wanted to transform, pardon me, when I told him I wanted to transform our family story into a solo show. He
You
said,
know, I saw your show in Miami.
"Oh,
I
at the
want to
Colony
say,
or where?" Because I did several. Do you
I
remember?
think at a bookstore maybe 20 years ago.
No, never performed because I have technicians and there's sound and light. Maybe I did a little talk there.
No, there were okay.
Oh, I know what you did. It's next door to the bookstore. It was a furniture store where they filmed me for PBS and NPR. I know what that was. That was a blast. I totally remember that. That was so long ago. Yeah.
That's where I first saw you, and I
Books
said,
and books.
who is this weird lady?"
I know. Weird Chester look. A weirdo. Yeah. Well, there's a little cuckoo inside of all of us, and thankfully, that's there. Yeah. So, um, my dad, as I said, the gift, the big feather in my hat, as I see it, Hindi, is that my father sent me a letter of thanks for giving him the courage to come out publicly as a Jew because he was moved. Arthur Hiller's on board. All of our relatives, not all of them, but a lot of the extended relatives have come back into the fold. And it lifted I believe, a lot of his shame, which was at the root of a lot of it. For one, he said, when you convert to Catholicism, the Jews will never forgive you. He was very close to his rabbi, his own rabbi grandfather, who was a Hasidic rabbi when he was a little boy, and he knew who he was. This was a big part of who he was. So having gone totally away from that, he and the PTSD, understandably, like it's rational and irrational. That's why I'm not, I would never want to get angry at him. This is my incarnation, my soul's journey, and I chose it. It was rich and it continues to be. But he sent me a letter of thanks for giving him the courage to go back to his roots, which, as I said, he did publicly at the Jewish Community Center in Vienna. And he's buried in the Viennese Central Cemetery in Vienna, as in the Jewish section, as a Jew, close to the only marked grave of his relative, which is his rabbi uncle. And the whole Viennese Hasidic community came to his funeral. Um, so, that made me feel good, you know.
What a gift that you gave him, that
Uh,
he was able to, as they say, come out of the closet and,
Come
and
out of the knish closet.
yeah. And how old was he when he passed?
80, well, it was, I think, excuse me now, I'm trying to remember exactly, pretty close afterwards. I don't remember right now, so I don't want to pull it out of my tuchus.
Okay.
It's not too far after that. Yeah.
So he was able to transition with peace.
Yes, right. And so with all the, bumpy, that was such a gift to me.
Yes.
Validating, and boy, talk about a signpost that you're on track. That being said, Hindi, I performed this play for many years afterwards, all over, and, you know, not to toot my horn, but so many people, not just Jewish, from so many different communities would thank me for giving them the courage. One, not to care about evaluation, because I used a lot of my humor in my shows as well, dark humor mostly, but still it was there, but also some stand up. And so, but people would come backstage, and at the time I totally didn't know what this meant. And healers would come back and say, you have allowed 3 generations in the future and 3 in the past to heal. And I thought, wow, I'll take it, but it sounds pretty nutty. You know what I mean? Now I get it. We're all atomically connected. And so, not only atomically, but all of us with our voices, what you're doing, what everyone is doing, telling stories. But I want to highlight the following. In my case, it became a toxic work for me because
Mhm.
it was wildly healing for me to be a truth teller, and then revisiting the dark underpinnings and the darkness that was inherent in the story was like ripping off a scab repeatedly. And so I made myself unwell as a result. And and so I healed myself. I began to, through other sidelines and different ways of expression, I realized that there were different levels of shame I had to deal with, and I realized I was not breathing. And so, not to kind of spell it all out, but I developed for myself ways to heal myself, um, from anxiety, because it still reared its head, even though I'd gone public and done so much work and worked with Arthur Hiller for many years and yada, yada, yada. And so number one, I stopped doing the show. And that was hard because, it was a source of not only income, but people were excited. I had bookings, a year out and stuff like that. And I couldn't stop immediately. But, and also, so what happens is, I'm sure is our identity is,
Right. Your persona.
ugh, and there I was all of a sudden lost, going,
Yeah.
what the frickety flop am I gonna do? And I didn't have the answer. So one day I live here in Palm Beach with my beautiful husband, Danny, and I went to the ocean and just, became undone. And a pod of dolphins, Cindy, a pod, across the street. I was parked, across the street, jumped up and started to do as if they were Cirque du Soleil dolphins. People actually stopped their cars and went to see. We were, gobsmacked. It was such a gift. And it made me realize that my desire, my passion to reach for more joy, it was like a reflection, but I didn't have my I was so poof, I didn't have my phone on. I wish I had videotaped it because I wanted to show my husband later. It was unbelievable. And so I would get these little, celestial signs that I was on track. And so I began to really nurture myself with breath work that I developed. I was meditating and I started to hum one day. Well, and it was really obnoxious. I wanted to, stop thought and just be connected to breath. And it wouldn't, it kept kind of coming up, but I kind of liked it. So I began to research humming and realize how ancient it was. And then I used, various audiences to beta test different forms of humming. And I began working as a healer and sharing my nervous system regulation tools, techniques, processes with people and finding out what really worked. And people loved it. And so I was able to heal myself. I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and I healed myself from that naturally. I have zero judgment, zero, about what people do to heal or what road they choose politically, religiously, or any of that. I am a lover. I love people. That heals me. It heals all of us. And of course, never, ever, ever, ever to condone abuse. But in my case, I was able to heal myself naturally. Of course, I dealt with food and all those kinds of things, but it was really about using nervous system calming, breath and humming, and telling a different story. And what I mean by that is I began to write what I call my juicy life story, rewrite it, suspend reality. Do all the what ifs, right? Things that I've been taught as a method actress, but I parlayed them into kind of what people would imagine often is a fairy tale, but taking a leap of faith. And so much of what I started to write and orate out loud, whatever you want to call it, to God, Goddessa, the creator, the big pecan pie in the sky, it doesn't matter. As far as Frannie Sheridan's concerned, we're all from the unified field of love. That, these things I began to generate them from the quantum field. And now this is backed by science, which is now, meeting belief systems, together. With historians, and these are ancient practices that we're just really channeling a lot of what's already been shared. And gosh, we are so connected to non-physical. So I feel very connected, Hindi, to my family. That's my father and mother who are in
So,
non-physical.
did you, Franny, during this period of your um, transitioning, if you want to call it, and releasing, did you need to do deep forgiveness work? Was it necessary for you to consciously forgive?
Not in my case, because
Okay,
I don't think I ever blamed.
you didn't.
I don't think I did, and that's why it didn't align with this Broadway director's vision of how I should redo my play. That just was not to blame anyone or to make anyone wrong for having their particular set of, but I think each one of us is, a unique
Yes,
snowflake.
that's why I'm asking, because so often we hear in this journey of healing that you need to go deep and you need to forgive your mother, your father, yourself, you're this, you're that. And of course, we all have different paths. And I believe there's many highways to heaven. So
Yeah, that.
when we read a book and it's, many people take things as dogmatic. It says like step one, step two. Um, and that may work for so many people. But
Right.
I really think that when we're really ready to release that, and we've got more work to do in the world, if you want to call it that, then sometimes it could be as simple as a hocus pocus, whatever that means. Of course, everything is in the breath, but there are many ways there are many ways. And I think for anybody listening, it doesn't have to be Franny's way or my way or this guru or that guru or rabbi or priest or whatever. It's inside of you.
Yes, 100% agree again. And because I think also, Hindi, I had the gift of my journey of the catharsis of performing my show. And I played all the parts in my, I'm sure you saw Next Door from Books and Books. Uh, I felt a lot. I think I did a lot of the healing of the grief that my familial grief, and this is why healers said that you healed 3 generations in the past and 3 in the future, because we are so connected. Just to come full circle to what I started saying with non-physical and all energy. This is Frannie Sheridan's belief that has gone before. If we open up to whatever you want to call it, the light, staying connected with the love that I believe we all are, and so no, forgiveness in the sort of, in a kind of mm, cerebral or way was not something that I needed. I adore my parents. I adore my family. And it was difficult for some of them that I was the youngest sister, I still am, went ahead and blew their cover. Another great thing that happened, Hindi, is one of my eldest sisters, who was a pharmacist, who I'd been estranged with for 9 years for no reason other than what happened in our families. I said the division, the sides, crazy. I loved her as a little girl, but also she was 50, she's no longer in physical. She was 15 years my senior. She came to visit me in Vancouver, and she's an identical twin. And her twin sister, who's coming to visit me in a week and a half here in Florida, um, who also was an eye surgeon like my dad, is retired now. They came to visit me in Vancouver, and I convinced them. So the 3 of us went to therapy with at Marilee, who she had her hands full. But we did a lot of healing, but more so, Marilyn was my sister's real name, the one who has passed. I call it changing cars because I feel the connection so much. To me, it's just like changing bodies, changing cars, or going to non-physical. And she uh, thanked me. She said, if you do nothing else as an artist, is what she wrote me, you've done enough. And she, who was married to a lovely man who was Christian, and had, 2 sons, never told anyone other than him that she was actually Jewish. And with his support, she actually became very active with her Jewish Federation and so on in Tucson, Arizona, where she lived. She actually gave all of these things were amazing. See, what happened, Hindi, is at one point during my performance career, doing the solo show, doing the solo dramatic show, because I've done solo full length, comedy things and all that, but which was called the Waltonsteins first. At another point, it was called Confessions of a Jewish Shiksa. I think that's when you saw it.
Yeah.
And it had different names because it evolved. But my where I had gone to church as a little girl in Ottawa, Canada, St. Basil's got in touch with me because I had all this, stinking press, like I said. And also a synagogue in Ottawa, where I grew up, Temple Israel, got in touch with me, and they both wanted to book my show and bring it to Ottawa. So I went, like, why don't you save some money and, team up? And because I had to come in with my technicians, and I had sound and lighting and all this beautiful stuff that they'd created. And so they did. And they created, because my show at that time was called Waltonsteins, after, of course, I was a send-up of the, 70s TV show about the Waltons, right?
Right.
They were a big family that were not Jewish and lived on a mountain, and we weren't, essentially. So Team Waltonsteins was born, and it became the beginning of much healing between the two communities. So they co-produced my show in a beautiful state-of-the-art theater at the Museum of Civilization in Hull, Quebec, which is very close to Ottawa. And oh my gosh, by that time, things have been really public. So fast forward, this is one of the most, when we all have our, memories in our life where we want to feel really good and feel really bolstered. And this was one of them for me because, Shelley Page introduced my show, and she was, she's a well respected, acclaimed journalist. I did my solo show to a standing ovation at Packed House, but more so, Hindi, four of my siblings and their children, many of them I hadn't met, were sitting in the front row which was kind of scary, but it really probably saved me a few years of therapy right there. They came to see my show. And afterwards, there was a question and answer period. And long story short, Arthur Hiller stood up, and the whole audience was like, because at that time, he was very famous. This is before the internet, and came to the microphone and congratulated me. But what he said is, I read your screenplay and we have to talk. Well, as a surprise, they had flown him in, or he'd flown in, and from Beverly Hills where he lived, and they had a huge party for me, and it was life changing. That began a wonderful working relationship with Arthur, who was just a lovely man. And so, yeah, powerful things ensued.
So that's amazing that you were able to reconnect to your family, and I think that's so beautiful, because you hear today of so many families that don't talk to each other, brothers and sisters, and they don't know who the niece is, and this and that. And if you ask them why, sometimes they don't even know why they don't talk to each other anymore.
Right? Yeah.
So how healing was that for your family?
Yeah, it was. And I don't want to place judgment because I'm not going to get into it. But, like, for example, I know one person who doesn't talk to a sibling, not because they don't love them, because I think the work is really private anyway. At the end of the day, we can say, I love you, but secretly, well, talk about people or whatever. That's not, but I believe sometimes boundaries are such that it's necessary because the other person perhaps doesn't respect enough it can be tricky, but I'm with you. I'm a lover, and I've no problem apologizing, owning, and sometimes just distancing is part of loving, even loving the
Absolutely.
other. Yeah. So
Absolutely. Okay, so where are we now? You are doing what?
none of your business. I had to say that would make you laugh. Um,
I was waiting for the jokes to come out.
well, because that's for the late show. But here's the thing. So, yeah, like I believe I referred to earlier, I referenced that, a lot of when I wrote, so I have a few traditionally published like plays and blah, blah. And my memoir, Confessions of a Jewish Shiksa, which was published by Mosaic. And it did really well, third most popular at the Frankfurt Book Fair, says Howard, who published it, and blah, blah. A lot of people wanted to listen to it. Do you have an audiobook? I was like, no, and I'm not going to go back into the story, for goodness sake. And so a few years later, I just thought, you know what? This makes sense. I can do this if I highlight how everything was a gift. And that's so interesting that you use the exact words that I also mirror, reflection with what you're saying. Everything was a gift, because I have so many people in my audiences now who say, well, boy, if my parents had been different, my life would have been different and it would have been so much easier. And I always say, you know what? You're right. Might have been. Who knows? The point is, where are you now? What are you doing with this rich, mine the rich stuff and make lemonade, baby? And so that's what I've done as my intention, my prayers, that some people make, if they're ready, and if they're not, that's fine too. Inspired to let go of the blame shame game, because it was never a fun game anyway, that blame shame game. And there's so much of that in our society, and it keeps us stuck. And this is Frannie Sheridan's belief. And so, yeah, I tried to be normal, but it was taken, is the name of the audiobook that is now done. I found it, I'm self-publishing, and I decided to do that so that I could just do my own thing completely. But then you have to create a Kindle book, an addendum to it. So I'm just finishing that now. It'll be out within the week, hopefully at the latest, middle of next week. ACX, Amazon, and so I'm also showing people how I was able to parlay uh, my experience of being paralyzed with inherited PTSD into what I coined PTJO, post traumatic joy overload. Yoo-hoo! Through many of the tools, techniques, processes that I share with many audiences, and a lot of them are super fun. What's different about what I do is this is real time stuff. So there are so many geniuses who share really, really powerful prayers, meditations that are lengthy. That is not what I do. Hindi, my stuff is practical on the go. So, like if you're stuck in traffic, different things you can do then, because most people internalize, they stop breathing, and dis-ease, lack of ease creates all these issues. And, so I have different real time tools people can use. And of course, you have to practice them just like going to the gym, but it takes literally seconds every day to do this. And then when somebody calls you and freaks out, your mother-in-law or whatever, I had a great mother-in-law, so I'm not, my husband, Danny, I'm sure will listen to this, but, um, you're at a family dinner, somebody is criticizing you, whatever. When you feel that internal, you don't have to feel tortured. You know how to connect. Even if you're self-conscious and you can't make it audible, through my very simple, very clear practices, what you can do to self-regulate your nervous system. And I use color and imagination, and I love it, Hindi. It is, to me, I'm at the best place in my life. And I'll tell you, since we brought my darling husband, who's, Israeli, who grew up in a literal war zone. I grew up in one within the confines of my own home, as you know, his cortisol triggers, right, are something like, we are excellent friends. As they say, I married the right person, been married for 18 years, together for 20. However, he would get these, reactive stuff, and it wasn't just regular anger, and it would snowball. And I was like, who is this guy that's all of a sudden inheriting my husband's body? And thankfully, he is completely taking on this knowledge, because why? There's no more shame. It's out in the public domain. If you look, the military is now publicly talking about how, cortisol addiction is the root of much PTSD. And so that coat of shame has been lifted, and hubby is implementing this stuff in the moment. He's like, oh, cortisol, and he'll go into breath and humming and different things while he's driving. He used to have like crazy road rage. And that to
So
me,
I guess, sorry, awareness. Awareness is so important, right? Because I think that people become, it's become such a pattern, this nervous system that goes out of whack, but that's just who I am. And then you move on, and then it's like a seesaw up and down. But when you know and become aware, and you have the tools in your toolbox to do something about it. So, are there easy things that you can
yes,
recommend to
sure. But
someone?
yes, and I will, and I'd love to, but I want to say, just to speak to what you're just saying, many people are taught, oh, you're just not wired that way, or your culture is not wired. And bless everyone for where they're at in their evolution. This is not my belief. I believe we can all rewire, we can all reprogram, we can all repattern. And what is at the root of that? And I discovered this from years of working with clients and audiences, is shame. It's like, because, oh, if my pattern, if the way I behave and react is wrong, what have I done? How did I contributed to my divorce? I contributed to losing this job, to this problem in my family. And it makes people look with shame at their lives. And that is such a lost mm, bit of life. As I mean, you never really lose it. There's always more life and more life. I believe we're eternal, but I think, Hindi, it's not just that people realize they have a pattern. It's what will I be if I admit that this has that I have been hurting myself without knowing it. You know what I mean? And that is not helpful. It's just like I did the best I could. My dad did the best I could. You did the best you could, Hindy. I did the best I could in my life. Let us, give ourselves a break, love ourselves, and go, oh, I'm so glad if you want to call it screwed up, I'm so glad I did that there because look at how I am now and what I can help with. Let's not waste another moment feeling like, like we are victims. It's from victim to victor, baby. And so a couple of my very easy processes. So all you do is, first of all, just let it all go, let your shoulders go, and close your eyes with me. Those of you who are my beloved soul sisters and brothers, and close your eyes. Just let your shoulders go. First, just take a breath of golden light in through your mouth, just thanking your heart for beating all these years without a salary. At least mine hasn't received one. And so breathe in golden light with me through your mouth. And let's just exhale, washing your heart with golden light. Great. Now, keeping your eyes closed, just breathe in through your nose and hold it for a moment. So let's do that. Hold your breath, activating carbon dioxide, and we're going to just exhale, breathing out. And do that one more time. You're breathing in through your nostrils and holding it for a moment. And this time I want you to think of a color before you exhale, whatever comes to mind. I often like a soft pink, and exhale your soft pink. Keeping your eyes closed. And this time you're breathing in your color through your nose and holding it. Let's breathe in together. Holding your color and your breath and exhaling your color through your heart in thanks. Mine is soft pink. Even just doing that 3 times will calm you down. Now, the best way to do this is after you inhale, Hindy, and you hold your breath for a moment, activating carbon dioxide. When you're exhaling, you're humming on the word home. Home. So here we go. Breathing in your color through your nose. Hold it. And now exhaling, humming for as long as you can on the word home. Let's do that again twice more. Breathing in your color through your nose. Hold it. Exhale your color, humming on the word home, because we are indeed coming home to the love that we are on the word home. And the last time, let's do that with our eyes open, as if your hands are on the steering wheel. Somebody's cut you off. So when this is in your body, you don't even have to think about the color. You just breathe in through your nose, activating carbon dioxide when you hold it. When you exhale humming, you're activating nitric oxide, home, as well as many other, beautiful chemicals. Our bodies are a pharmacopoeia of nervous system regulating opportunities and chemicals, and also the opposite and everything in between. So those are 2 fast ones. I have plenty more, but just for the purposes of
That
your,
was so relaxing. I
right?
just feel like I woke up from a wonderful night's sleep.
I swear it blew my mind when I discovered this. I have tons of testimonials, and in my book, I tried to be normal, but it was taken. I tell people where they can go to get all of this for free from me. And, I get hired for all kinds of things too, but I want to spread as much, joy as I can in my way. Not everybody is ready for this. And that's 100% perfect. We would be so boring if we were all the same.
Absolutely. So if you could leave us with one pearl of wisdom, what would that be, Frannie?
Wow. Reach for joy. And if that means you're in grief, let yourself grieve if that's part of your process. If it's not, and walking around being like, hi, I feel really good and happy. Pretending to sell somebody something. I don't mean that at all. I mean, whatever you can do to feel a little better and a little better. Because I believe walking around the way that I was programmed to, and I don't, again, blame anyone. I believe that's my soul's journey. It was my tikkun, you know, is I want to inspire people to reach for joy authentically, be gentle and kind to yourself because hurt people, kind people can be kind. Reach for joy as much as you can without feeling like it's forced. Everyone is a unique snowflake. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Frannie. This
Oh,
has been just amazing, amazing. And I know that there are people out there just by watching, listening to you, and getting your audio book, that you are a gift to the world.
oh,
And I have to say, quite honestly, the Frannie that I saw 20 years ago is not the Frannie I see sitting across from me right now. And I feel so blessed that you gave us the gift of your presence today.
oh, well, thank you. And I take that as such a beautiful reflection of you and all of us that have the opportunity to shed skins, And I'm so proud of the Franny I was 20 years ago and the one that I'll be in 20 years. And, I go live at 12 noon today, every Thursday when I don't have a paid gig, on Facebook at Frannie Sheridan with these processes. And I'm also going to possibly read a little from my upcoming book. I tried to be normal, but it was taken. Um, and on TikTok on Friday mornings at 9 a.m. at the real Frannie Sheridan. If anybody wants free processes that are fun and really easy, like there's nothing complex. It's just, allowing ourselves to go, oh, this little shift with breath and humming. Right. So lots of love. I love you so much, Hindy, and I so appreciate the work you're doing and really great to connect. Thank you.
Thank you, Frannie.
Mm.